How big a threat is the tariff trade war for Apple? And do you believe they can shift production to India fast enough to put it behind them?
Yeah, so as far as the tariff story is concerned, I feel like Apple's really kind of been this poster boy child between the U.S.-China relations. But as far as this quarter is concerned, I think Apple will be perfectly fine. There even could be potentially a benefit for Apple this quarter as you see a pull-in of demand possibly. But I think as far as what we need to keep an eye out for is not necessarily the numbers this quarter. It's what Apple has to say from a demand perspective on China as well as, to your point, manufacturing capacity potentially away from China. How can they circumvent some of these tariffs from China as well? So our view right now is, near-term headwind, Apple will be able to offset the higher tariffs by increasing prices later this year when they roll out the iPhone 17 cycle. But as far as the manufacturing shift, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, right? I mean, this might take 6 to 8 quarters before we see them potentially shift about two-thirds or so of the U.S. needs of their phones, to from China to India. So it's going to take time. It's not something that you're going to see 100% coming from China, from India to the U.S. Anytime over the next 2 to 4 quarters.
So I'm one of those people who sped up or pulled forward a purchase and worried about tariffs. But why is the US consumer in this era going to pay more for an Apple device, especially an iPhone? And then I want you to hit upon the fact that not many people are very impressed with Apple Intelligence.
Yeah, so as far as the tariffs are concerned, we're looking at right now they are exempt from the tariffs, so or at least exempt from everything except for the 20% fentanyl-related tariff in China. But they are kind of thrown under this semiconductor window, which we're seeing a 232 investigation on, where they have a temporary pause on tariffs outside of that 20% that I just alluded to on the fentanyl. So until we see greater clarity on the 232 investigation, which we expect over the next couple of months before the iPhone 17 cycle starts, they're kind of working under this freebie situation. What we do think will happen for the 232, we're looking at about a 25% tariff. That's our base case. That we think will be offset by higher pricing. That's the concern for consumers right now. Is
Yeah,
prices. Yep.
that prices will go up. Tell me real quick, this 232 investigation, that has to
Yep.
do with the chips that are being used in China within the iPhone devices?
So it would be any type of chips made overseas. So we're talking about this being a national security issue, which is why we've essentially kind of why the administration is exempt Apple as well as other hardware-oriented companies from these tariffs. And that's going to fall under the semiconductor umbrella. So any type of semiconductors that are included inside an iPhone that is essentially made outside of the US will be hit with a tariff.
And we don't
And
know how much the price increase, though, will be when that actually goes into effect, do we?
right, because we don't know what the tariff will be at this point in time. We're still waiting on what that 232 investigation will give us. Again, if we're looking at it potentially, our base case is a 25% tariff, and if that's what we see, you're talking about potentially about a $15 billion hit if you're looking at just US oriented products. So that's something, again, we think Apple could work with. You're talking about, increasing prices, let's call it, maybe in the $50, $65 range, where maybe they can offset some of the other costs also by accelerating some of the production to India. And then over time, I think what's incredibly important is you potentially have to increase pricing here, or increase pricing for your products. Over time, Apple's not going to roll those prices back, right?
Right.
They're going to be able to kind of offset some of those costs and be able to hopefully improve their margin profile.
I got the iPhone 16. I'm still waiting for Apple Intelligence. Not impressed on this end. What about you?
I'm probably more impressed than you are, to be honest with you. When we've seen them basically do two rollouts of Apple Intelligence. That second rollout out had Apple Playground, had App Visual Intelligence. we kind of like some of the stuff that was embedded in that second rollout. Of course, what everybody is waiting for is that Siri integration across the Apple Store, and that's something that's probably not going to happen until 2026 at this point. Apple needs to get that right. We think they eventually will get it right. It's probably a good thing that they held off on it, because what Apple does well is they're typically late to the game, but they usually get things right. So if they get this right and they can kind of throw it alongside the iPhone 17 launch later this year, maybe it also helps justify some of the pricing increase that we're going to see later this year.
And as an investor who might be considering my Apple stock, what's the revenue number in billions that you think we should pay attention to? Are you putting out an expectation?
So as far as the growth number is concerned, we're looking for about 4% growth for the quarter here. Apple alluded to about 300 basis point headwind uh, uh, from a currency headwind. Again, we're looking for a similar 4% increase for the June quarter as well. It would be about 94 billion this quarter, 89 billion next quarter. But again, I don't think the numbers necessarily matter that much. It's more along the lines of what they have to say in terms of the outlook, specifically in China as we go into the June quarter.
And I do want to ask you real quick, because I realize the United States is the largest market they have for iPhone, but in China, is there potential negative effects, Chinese consumers saying, you know what, I'm not going to get the iPhone because of the trade war?
That's the risk. And we do think there is going to be some demand destruction out there. The question is how much of that, and what do we hear from Apple on that side of things? It may take more than 3 months to fully flesh this all out. I will say this though, when you look at how Apple has performed in China the last 2 years, Huawei has become much stronger over the last 2 years, and Apple has seen essentially their revenue percentage from China drop from about 20% of sales 2 years ago to 15% in the most recent December quarter. So they've worked with essentially revenue declines in 8 of the last 9 quarters on a year-over-year basis. They've worked through less just challenges in the broader China market from greater competitive pressures over the last 2 years. So there's going to be some demand disruption here, we think, over the next 12 to 18 months from China. But again, it's something that we think Apple will be able to work with, and we'll see how it plays out.